So in the next series of videos, we're going to talk about the midstream industry and the effect it has on the E&P industry. The principal thing you need to understand is how it affects it, but the midstream industry is so integral to that, you have to understand the whole infrastructure as a whole. If you think about it, the midstream industry differs significantly between oil, or crude oil specifically, and natural gas. Where does virtually all the crude oil go to? It goes to refineries, who then do their magic, and then much of the stuff from the refinery moves via pipeline to their final products. That's not the same for natural gas. Once natural gas is cleaned, before it's put into the pipelines, then it can go directly to the end customers. And so we're going to take a look at the end of the presentation on some specific numbers of how it impacts profitability. But you can see that when you don't have access to a pipeline, because pipelines, we're going to see later, is the cheapest way to move your product, it affects your ability to make a profit because you're going to pay more to transport it. Now, if the pipeline crosses state lines, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does have a say in the pipeline pricing, but in reality, it is a competitive market where supply and demand sets the pipeline prices. So this chart shows you that pipelines are central to moving product in the United States. For gas, for obvious reasons, and if it's not obvious to you, will be after the class discussion about liquefied natural gas, that pipelines are by far the most economical and safest way to transport natural gas. When it comes to oil, you see that the vast majority of it goes by pipeline, but you also see a big number from the tankers and the barges, and a lot of that has to do with simply moving the product on the Gulf Coast, and I'll show you. Rail has a very small segment, and I'll show you why. The chart on the upper left-hand side shows how does crude oil get delivered to refineries. What you've seen in this chart is the decrease in crude that arrives by ship, and that's mainly because the United States has imported less crude from overseas as U.S. production has gone up, and you can see that the amount of production that has come by pipeline, which is how it gets to the refineries from U.S. production, has increased. When I first started learning about the midstream industry, I didn't realize just how much, particularly refined product, moves by barge. And you see in the bottom the bottom right-hand graphic, the intercoastal waterway. If you're not already aware of this, you will be after you watch the downstream segment. So much of the refining capacity is on the Gulf Coast, and they move a lot of product by barge, I guess, after it's refined. You see a huge takeoff in rail in the early 2010s, or however you want to say, just after 2010. Why was that? Well, the answer to that is very simple. As the Bakken up in North Dakota started oil production, they did not have the pipeline infrastructure to move that oil effectively, and so it went by rail. And you see in the out years it starts to tick down a little bit, and that's because pipelines start to become available in the Bakken area. But in short, rail is an effective way to move crude oil if there is not pipeline infrastructure. Okay, well, why bother building pipelines then if rail is so good? And the first answer is price. Now you have to, and I apologize for this being a little bit of a dated information. The reason is it's very hard to get this information. This is proprietary information. I just happened to stumble across something that was available on commercial web. But you can see if you're moving heavy crude from Canada down to Houston and you move it by rail, you're going to pay twice as much as if you moved it by pipeline. And that's money that's just a dead loss to the E&P company. There's no benefit to moving it by rail. It's just a pure extra expense. The second reason is that rail just isn't as safe as it is by moving pipeline. They'll tell you that there are newer rail cars to make shipping crude by rail safer, and that's true, but this particular incident that's depicted in the picture was those newer rail cars that are not supposed to explode as easily if there's a rail accident. Even though, environmentalists will attack pipelines. When you look at the overall record, pipeline safety, pipeline efficiency, and when I say safety, not only lives lost, but also spills, is really something that's pretty astounding. There are pipelines running all over the Wichita Falls area, and no one ever thinks about them. Why not? Because nothing bad ever happens. In the next video, we're going to get in and start talking about what it takes to construct a pipeline and look at the differences between natural gas and crude oil and refined product pipelines.